All right, today is January 19th, 2010. We have Trey Johnson doing the video, Aaron Parkinson doing the podcast, Annika doing pictures, and I'm Matt Guerin and I'm doing the interview. And we start off with your name.
Dennis Ballard.
And we are talking about the tornado, right?
Yes.
And what year did this occur?
In 1974, I believe it was June 18th in the evening.
And what was how did the day start off? Was there...
It had been weather had been forecast. We didn't know how severe at that time, but it looked threatening enough that the city administrator, myself, and the fire chief were all at our offices and waiting in case something had happened. I had just got back from classes at the area college, and we set the sirens off when we got the word from the weather service that it was supposed to be imminent at 9:30. At 9:30, everyone remembers, nothing happened. At about 10:25, one of the television stations came on the air and basically said it was all clear. And at I believe the exact time, as I remember, it was 10:33 p.m. on that day that the tornadoes did strike Ankeny.
Mm-hmm. Now, was it just one tornado or was it multiple?
At the time, of course, we didn't know that. I went up later in one of the guard helicopters, and it looked to me like we had 5 separate paths that went through Ankeny, mm-hmm. from the northwest to the southeast. Mm-hmm. And the worst part of the destruction seemed to be in the southeast portion of Ankeny.
Mm-hmm. Now, after you had seen all this stuff from the helicopter and you went down and actually saw it, up close and personal, what were you thinking, how many people had been injured?
Well, prior to that, the helicopter observance, that evening, we had decided that Hy-Vee parking lot was a good staging ground to set up for the search and rescue effort. At that time, we had no idea what we were looking at as far as people injured was. We took, the Highway Patrol brought a command van up. The city of Des Moines brought their command van up because we had lost power, and that meant our communications were pretty bad. So we had to go to alternative sources for that.
At that time, where was Hy-Vee located?
Hy-Vee was at East 8th and 69, and the parking lot was relatively clear there. From that area, we started to have different law enforcement agencies show up to assist us, volunteer firemen. We had probably, in less than 2 hours, we had over 200 law enforcement and fire personnel. So we had to set up teams to start searching the area. It was so badly damaged in that area. And as we got through that phase of it, we of course found the whites, which were on the southeast 10th area, close to that. And there was a lot of people that were injured, but most people, because of the early warning at 9:30, were aware of the situation as far as the weather, and were able to take our advice and seek shelter. So after that, we had to, part of my job was to secure the city. As I did that, we were lucky enough that a captain, and I can't recall his name, but he was with the regular Army, happened to be training at Camp Dodge. Through General May, who happened to drop by because of the situation, we were able to secure regular Army troops that were training over there to secure the perimeter of the city, to kind of keep the city safe and keep the onlookers and people that just shouldn't have been there out for their own safety and for the safety of the people that were still here. As we did that, and it was probably 4 to 6 hours later, the National Guard took over, and we set up checkpoints where people could get back in the city, because at that point the mayor had declared martial law and kept everybody out so that we didn't have that problem. And it was the same way at night. We didn't have people wandering the street, and we didn't have to worry about going on rescue calls and wondering who was at what building and why they were there. So it was a long night. The next day we were able to assess the damage more than we had the night before. We just were in one part of the city, and we had damages not only in the southeast portion of the city, but also in the northwest, where the wind was so severe that was actually it blew houses down, and we had a lot of damage there. So at that point, we had made our assessment of the damage through the city administrator, Jeff Segan, the fire chief, Marvin Frisk, and myself, and with the assistance of a lot of different agencies, the State Highway Patrol, the Des Moines Police Department, the Polk County Sheriff's Office, and almost any agency that could send people did, as far as Story County. Even their emergency team came down to help us.
Now, when you said we found the whites, what does that mean?
They were in the house had been leveled and was laying in the street, and they were under some of the debris.
So it was the family, the whites.
Two people.
Okay.
And they were apparently sleeping at the time.
Okay. Now,
I know this is hard to answer,
Okay.
but I asked the question.
All right.
I'm sure a lot of things were going on that night.
Yes.
And what were some of the things that stick out in your mind the most as either being the strangest or the oddest things that happened, or as part of the tornado, or as some of the rescue efforts, or just what sticks out in your mind are some of the strangest memories or oddest things about the tornado?
At the time that it was happening, I had just in about 5 or 6 months earlier been appointed chief of police. So I was relatively new in the job, and at the time we did not have a emergency preparedness plan laid out. So starting off from ground zero to what we eventually elevated to, that was a lot of, I didn't have a lot of time to think about what was going on. I was trying to carry out my job, which was the security of the city, and to keep our citizens safe. And we had a lot of things that I didn't know was going to happen that did happen. One was that surprised me is they turned off all the gas to the city from a shut-off outside, which we were having problems because of a lot of houses being completely flattened, of gas coming out of the pipes that were broken. Another thing that was gone immediately was, of course, power. And we thought we had a relatively good communication set up with the police department, but without power, we did not. Our portable radios were the only thing we had, and they were good for maybe a 2-3 block area. And during the storm, they were not any good at all. I don't know what it was about the weather or what happened, but that one surprised me. During the night, it was another thing we had a lot of trouble with was flat tires on vehicles. Anywhere we drove, we of course collected nails from roofing and that type of thing, which set us back quite a little bit. But the main thing that really overwhelmed me was the amount of assistance we got immediately. The community and the law enforcement community from the people that I knew outside the community were there. The only ones that did not come were the ones that were affected, such as Pleasant Hill and Altoona. They were also hit by this same weather system.
yeah. How badly were the other?
Pleasant Hill was hit pretty severely. Matter of fact, a lot of they found that was another oddity of this storm. a lot of the debris from Ankeny was picked up at various stages across to as far as Pleasant Hill.
So now, is there somebody that was helping you at the time, like as a personal assistant to you, or were you just?
We were, of course, confined in this semi-trailer for a while, this command center, just showing the grids, usually taking section by section in the city to make sure everybody was out and okay, and the injured out. It mainly was the people that were wanting back in immediately that we couldn't let in. A lot of people got mad at me over that, but I did keep them out for about a day. And even some of my own people that were out of the city at the time, I had given the guard the orders that no one was to get through, and they upheld that. So as quick as we could, we set up staging areas at the perimeter points and started getting people back in the city so they could start cleaning up the areas in their houses and getting the repairmen and the contractors and those type of people back in the city.
What changed about Ankeny preparedness after, like what lessons did the city learn?
Ours was one of, we were fairly unique in the area that we didn't have to worry about the perimeter of the city because that was easily attained with the amount of people that we had to keep people out for a good while. But after that, we took the preliminary notes that at the time City Administrator Segan, myself, and Fire Chief Marvin Frisk had put together and made them into a plan for emergency preparedness. And not only for tornadoes, but for any kind of emergency that the city had.
Now, the night that this happened, did anyone see the tornado that you knew, or did you see the tornado yourself, or tornadoes, I should say?
I did not see it myself. I was standing in the station at the time, which was in the 700 block of 3rd Street, looking out a large window about the size of that picture behind you. And as the weather hit, it pulled that window out about a foot and came back with a severe bang, which at that time we were exiting the door out of my office going to the middle of the building because we didn't realize what was happening. And then we received 2 phone calls, like I say, the one for the house that was down. The second one was that the highway patrolman was on 1st Street with a telephone pole laying across his car, and that happened to be John Appleton. He lived here in the city. And after that, the phone lines were so jammed from people calling in that we got no other phone calls.
And about how big is that picture behind him?
Yeah, at the time it was rather large. And
So the window was, like, how big was the window?
The window was probably 6 foot by 4 foot. And why it didn't break was beyond me, but it did stay intact. But it was the weather that pulled it out, and then as it went by, pulled it back in. And the next thing we knew that some of the volunteers were coming from the fire station, which was across the street, over to our station, and complaining about bricks and debris flying through the air. So.
Tornado's path.
Oh, yeah. What was the tornado's path? Because there was multiple. Do you remember which ways they were going?
It primarily came from the northwest across the city, and it jumped, as I could see from the air later, it jumped several apartment buildings and residential areas, dropped into the school area at Nevlin, the old school, and took 3 floors of that outside of the school and left the wall standing, and bounced up again and hit the 8th Street Mall, which were Paul and Jewelry, the clothing store, and several other businesses there. And then hit the southeast side And it took that just on when it hit, it stayed down until it left the city. And like I say, it looked like 5 trails to me. Some have said they may have saw 6, but as far as touchdown, it looked like 5 trails to me.
Asking where would be the best source of any, like aerial photographs or photographs of the tornado that he knows of?
What would be the best source of finding aerial photos of the tornado's path?
I'm not sure exactly, other than the Weather Service out on Polk City Drive there. They may have some. I have not seen any at that point.
Do you have some?
Do you have?
I did have some pictures that were given to me, but I've passed them on to my children. We've got quite a supply of them, but it was pretty severe. What didn't what the tornado didn't flatten, the high winds blew down, and we did have some really high winds. I don't know what they would have classified this tornado in the EF range or not, but I'm sure we were in a 3 or 4.
Now, in the days after the tornado, and weeks, months, how long did it take to clean up all of this? And
we were a good probably 6 months for getting pretty much everything back in order. But it was surprising to me that the people in the city that came out with their chainsaws, their trucks, hauled the debris away and got the city so that the streets were at least passable in a week's time. And we were able to, after about 3 days, set up certain areas that the press was another one that was kind of nagging about wanting to get in and take pictures of all this and get stories, which at that point I hadn't let them in right away. So we had to make amends there and set up an area where they could come in, see, and take pictures of what had happened. Mm-hmm. And that was one we had to kind of work on later that we should have been a little more attentive to, was getting them in. And at the time, I kind of felt like they were in the way. That was from my perspective, but they were looking to get the news and seeing what was going on. We were looking at the safety of everybody here at that point.
Can you explain to us what martial law is?
Yes, when the mayor was asked to declare martial law, that was so that I could call up the National Guard and use them to cordon off the city, and also so that we could keep everyone off the streets in the evenings. And that gave us the power to do that. And that only lasted, we did that for two nights until we were able to get electricity back somewhat and turn lights on to where it wasn't just completely dark here at night.
As far as rebuilding houses and stuff and getting back to complete normalcy, how long did that take, do you think?
I'd imagine probably a year and a half. It was about 3 days before I got home, and my house had a lot of windows pulled out of it. I lived in the central part of town at the time. And
What street?
on Walnut Street. And the shingles and things like that were messed, but everybody was safe. Matter of fact, 2 of my officers that happened to be driving by when their police vehicle got airborne, it lifted it off the ground, left the vehicle and got in my house and went to the basement with my family. Of course, I didn't know that at the time, but it was pretty hectic for everybody around there. I know my neighbors had houses that were lifted off the foundations and turned, and it was one of at the time I didn't have the luxury of worrying about where my family was at. I had a lot of other responsibility at that time.
Where were your
first thoughts when you saw how much devastation there was?
It was unimaginable to me that a tornado could do that much, but after that it made a believer out of me. And I had went through, in my 30 years with the police department, 5 tornadoes in Ankeny. And this one was, of course, by far the most severe.
So what was like the population at the time? Was it a lot smaller back then?
Yes, we were probably in the area of between 8,000 and 10,000.
What percentage of the community had damage?
I'd say probably 75% as far as I was concerned. There wasn't too many that didn't get some kind of
75%.
damage of the city. The most severe being the southeast side. I've heard people talk about the all clear that was given, and coming out of their basements to look, and having to actually literally claw their way back into the basement, holding on to a step at a time while trying to be pulled out of the house from the weather. And there was just a lot of things that you ordinarily would not see, that I had not seen before. But the power of the storm, where wood was driven through concrete walls, and it was just hard to imagine that much could happen with a weather system.
Why do you think there was an all clear? I mean, what happened that occurred?
During those years, everyone was anxious to get those all clear notes, which many of the departments, not only police, fire, and cities, were reluctant to do that because of the litigation that could follow if they said, okay, all clear, and then boom, you get a tornado. That somebody could drive you into court on that to seek damages. But it just was one of those things that during the evening hours, it's hard to tell when there's an all clear. And I don't know how the one station decided that it was, they were able to call that. They didn't have the system they have now to know that. With the system they have now, it'd be a lot easier to do, and a lot of times they can do it pretty accurately.
And what day of the week was it? Do you remember?
I believe it was a Tuesday, because I had classes at the area college on Tuesdays and Thursdays that week, and Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays the following week.
So how long did you remain police chief after the tornado in
I
1974?
spent till 1995, 30 years, and then I retired June 18th, or June 14th actually, of 1995.
And you say that Nevelin, the school at the time, was completely destroyed. Where did the kids go to school after this had happened?
I do not remember where they put them after that. Keith Hopkins was the superintendent then, and I believe they had alternative places that they could use, but it just literally took 3 floors out of the building and left the walls standing.
The actual part he's talking about at one time was called Central. It's missing right here. The
Right
barn,
there.
Barn is sitting on the
Property.
And the other part.
So they didn't rebuild any part of Nevelin other than
Well,
the main part to fix it
The
up?
main part, they fixed
They
up.
fixed
This
up.
part, which was called
Central.
Central,
Yes.
was completely torn down then after that.